My next guest is Glenn Robbins. He is a proud superintendent of the Brigantine Public School District in Brigantine, New Jersey. He has served as a public school superintendent in New Jersey since 2016. Prior to becoming a superintendent, he was a middle school principal, high school assistant principal, a high school social studies teacher, and a high school varsity coach. He is also the best-selling author of Calm in the Chaos, Ancient Stoic Wisdom for Successful School Leadership, and a sought-after speaker. Glenn has been awarded numerous administrative, international, national, and state recognitions, including the National Exemplar of Education Award, Northeast Innovative Superintendent Award, the New Jersey Visionary Superintendent Award, Digital Promise League of Innovative School member, the NASSP Digital Principal of the Year, Samsung Solve for Tomorrow winner, and SETDA Student Voice Award winner. He has also been invited to the White House and the U.S. Department of Education several times. Welcome to the podcast, Glenn.
Thank you, and it's great to be here.
Well, we'll start off with the question I ask everybody. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and I was thinking about this for a while. I think I would not be where I am today if I didn't fall into multiple trenches throughout my path. It could be from paying off a substantial amount of student loans and not having much of a life. It could be some hardships I went through early in life. It could be, being passed over for an administrative position, I don't know how many times, and then eventually getting to a principal position and then superintendency and becoming successful. So I think, one of the hardest things I think was being, like you mentioned, the digital principal of the year. And I went on to become a superintendent. And then we had to deal with budget cuts and so forth. And that was not for the faint of heart. And I know a lot of the superintendents and administrators are dealing with that right now with budgetary cuts and having to let go of staff. That's never easy, because the last thing you ever want to do in education is let somebody go. And I had to deal with in the book, it mentions like how I had to deal with the board and how they had to deal with almost like a firing squad. You're sitting at the board and you're constantly taking hit after hit after hit. And, thinking about that and reflecting and all the things that I went through, it made me a better person. It humbled me a lot more in my process, maybe knocked me down a few steps. And then since then moved on to a wonderful district where I'm at now. But I think, all those trenches that I fell into were somewhat of a blessing, that they all happened to me to keep moving me forward. I definitely would not be here right now if I didn't stumble, fall, and get back up.
Yeah, and that's like you said, it's that learning experience, those difficult experiences that get you to where you're at. Like you said, you were not chosen for leadership jobs along the way, but you still persevered, and you've been superintendent for 7 years, 8 years, right?
Yeah.
And so is that never giving up? Yeah. So I'm here, have you on to talk about this book you co-wrote with Danny Bauer, Calm in the Chaos. So it's Ancient Stoic Wisdom for Successful School Leadership. So talk to me a little bit about the collaboration process. I know in the book there are different snippets that both of you write, so we can tell like who's talking about different stories. And I've known Danny for a long time, and talk about kind of how you got together with Danny to plan out the writing of this book.
Yeah, so great questions. Daniel Bauer and I have been friends for I don't know how many years as well, probably like you. You've known him for quite some time. I actually hosted a conference for schools that were losing state aid money that no one could, afford to send anybody out. So we hosted a free conference, and I brought Danny in as one of my 20 speakers to speak and help elevate the minds, souls, and hearts of all these educators and superintendents and whatever it may be, that they could not send out one person to a conference. They could send all of them here because it was free. So when Danny was there, I was thinking about for a while writing a Stoic leadership book, always very big on Seneca, Aurelius, and so forth. And I needed another collaborative brain just because of my hectic schedule. And I needed somebody that was a person I could collaborate and trust with. And I went to Danny and said, hey, I have this idea. And at that time I gave him, and I gave every presenter, Ryan Holiday's book, Stillness is the Key, had just come out. I gave one to every presenter. And I said, I want to do something similar to this with education. And he said, yes, let's do it. And he said, look, I have a couple of things on my board that I want to take care of first. I totally get it. And then as the world progressed, right, we had the following year or so was 2020. and we all know what happened then. And then I moved on to a different job. He moved to a different country, came back home, but we never lost sight of it. And we would
Yeah.
always talk. We were there on text or DMs and so forth as friends. And then finally, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we said, all right, are we finally ready to do this? And, he came down to my house, we met up, and we just started writing, and the rest is history. So his passion for leadership and helping people grow as well as mine, and tying in to each of us our philosophical conversations that we'd have about Stoicism, made a wonderful partnership.
Yeah, and this is a pretty easy read. It's divided into several chapters, but it is, something you can read in just a few hours. It's 5 chapters, wisdom, justice, courage, temperance, and equanimity. So like you said, I've also read Stillness is the Key. He had that in his mastermind when it came out. And thinking about like philosophy and those types of things for leaders, I think it's a good take on, how we think about what we do on our daily basis.
Yeah, it was almost like a reflective practice in
Yeah.
a way when we put these practices into this. Like you mentioned, Danny and I have 3 sections each where it says Glenn or Danny. And then we also tied in a bunch of case studies, things that we have been through before. And we wanted to do a couple different things with this book. Number one, we wanted it short for intentionality practices. Like,
Yeah.
we don't have much time. You're making how many decisions a day? You have a family to go home to, you have whatever it may be. We wanted something short, practical, and concise on what someone could read as a quick reflection tool, and or make him or her think how they could do things differently. We also built it knowing that I help mentor aspiring superintendents for the last several years with the National Superintendents Association. And we've had a lot of new faces come into the game, and a lot of people retire, move on, or pushed out because of the world we reside in. So we figured if we could put all these little case studies or snippets, as you said, into all these different chapters, this way the leader of that team can have conversation with the rest of the leaders. What do we do in this situation? And it's not always a right or wrong answer, but it's trying to get everybody on board and have some philosophical conversations about leadership style, about growing other leaders and so forth. So like I said, people say it's short, and I'm like, it's short for a reason, because we want you to be able to read it, go back to it, and be able to speak to it.
Yeah. Like you said, people are busy in leadership, right? But it's something you can use along the way when you are dealing with challenges, when you need to kind of refocus and look at those different areas of Stoic wisdom. I wanted to ask you a little bit, as I mentioned in the bio, you've been invited to the White House. You told me once, and then you have recently been invited for a 3rd time to the U.S. Department of Education. So what capacity have you been in these places?
Yeah, so back in 2016, I was invited down to celebrate top educators in the country. So that was back in 2016 as a principal. And then since then, and before that, I was invited to the Department of Education. I'll be going back shortly. I'm not sure when this episode will air, but I'll be going back in the very beginning of the next month to talk about learning spaces for all students and special ed students and so forth in the school districts, and how to make these spaces more intentional, make them the 3rd teacher, how they can enhance education. So I'm excited to get down there and speak with the other group of panel and so forth with some of the best minds in the business. And just extremely grateful and humbled to be around an awesome team that allows me to go down there, and represent the school district as well. You don't get an invitation very often.
So you were also awarded the NASSP Digital Principal of the Year in 2016. So what did that entail? You talked a little bit about traveling, and how did that affect your leadership afterwards?
You know what? It's unique you asked that, because it was a success that I wasn't anticipating. We were doing a lot of great things at that school at that time, and I was sharing it out. And little did I know, people were paying attention to my social media feeds, and they nominated me, and I got it. And then what happened from there is people wanted to talk to you, and they wanted you to come speak to their district, come talk to their teams, come tour and so forth. And I was blessed by every moment of it, and the opportunities to meet people I've known for years on social media, and then also meet new friends along the way. And it also helped me because it helped me become a better educator with a lot of reflection. Like, hey, this school's doing this district's doing that. How could we, it's not just apples to apples, every district is different. So what practices are they using that I can make somewhat ours and so forth? And how can I help them raise up their game? And I think I don't want to say negative, but the hard part was the mentality of it afterwards. Like you received such a distinguished award and now you feel like you've made it to the top of the game, but now it's like, can you sustain it? Can you keep going? Can you keep rising up? And I think that's part of me being when I was my other earlier lifetime was as an athlete. I always strive to do better and better every day, and I think that's in my blood that I can continuously try to raise the bar every year for our kids and for our staff here. And I'm not complacent, and I'm not going to sit around and say, "All right, we did this. This is the best we can do." From there, I struggled with it mentally because I felt like I had to do more and I wasn't doing enough. And then I got imposter syndrome at times and, the full gamut that anybody goes through psychologically. But what I did realize is I started utilizing all these friendships that I've made over the years and used them more to my advantage, to help me grow and help them grow and help each other for the betterment of kids. And then from there, it raised me to superintendency, and I had a couple of distinguished awards from there that I never would have dreamt of. If you told me this 10 years ago, I'd have laughed at you. But here we are. And, the beautiful thing about this was I always equate back to when the pandemic, when we were all home, we were all, 15 days of flattening the curve. My staff, like many other staffs, were teaching Zoom for the first time to all these kids and families. Our living room was your living room and so forth. And I reached out to all these amazing presenters and friends of mine who are major keynotes. And I said, look, I know you're home in a basement like me. Could you really, just speak to my staff for 25, 30 minutes and refresh the minds, souls, and hearts of these educators who are doing amazing work? And can you speak to them? And we got it. We had a speaker every Friday, and I started inviting other schools. I invited the Department of Education. I invited board members, council members, anybody that needed a mental lift. And I thought that was such an amazing thing that we came closer together during a hardship. And it became because of that award. And there's, the growth from that. So I hope that answered what you were looking for potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I've interviewed a few people who've won that award, and just to kind of see how you use that, definitely, like you said, 3.5 years later, like using some of those people that you'd met along the way and had them speak and lift up your staff, because that was definitely a time where, they needed that support, and to have those connections from that year that you'd won the award. In your bio, a part that I didn't read that will be in the show notes, it talks about your passion is that every student educator can have the opportunity to succeed in their utmost potential in a VUCA world. So VUCA is a term that's used in your book. Explain what that term means and how this became your passion.
Yeah, so this came from a workshop years ago. A friend of ours, David Culverhouse out in California, brilliant man. If you don't follow him on social media, you need to, because you'll read his blog and you'll be mind blown for like an hour trying to comprehend everything. And then he puts out something else again and again. VUCA is a military term. And, me being a leadership junkie in some way, I love to read leadership books and talking about military leadership. VUCA is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So think about that. You're in this world, right? What is certain? There's nothing certain in here. Everything is volatile. Everything is complex. And how do you adapt with ambiguity and so forth? So to me, I think of it as another day. But it is a VUCA world. And I think that's part of leadership, is being able to be agile and flexible, to be able to, go through these tough times, because that shows who the true character of an individual can be. So if I can help these kids and staff get through these tough situations and give them the resiliency and the grit and the knowledge that they can move forward with and use that in their same life path, then I think we're achieving great things.
Yeah, I agree. Like it's we've talked a lot about just having the uncertainty when we were going through the pandemic, but now it is really dealing with some of the complex issues that we're dealing with now with, AI and, student disengagement and things like that. And how can we, and also the ambiguous nature sometimes of education, right? When we're doing new initiatives and things like that. So, I think people can refer to your book to read more about that. And I will list links in the show notes also to the workshop that you talked about as well. So thank you for that. Well, we've had a great conversation today around your book, around some of the things that you've achieved in your career. Out of everything we've talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
That I want this people to remember, or the kids to remember? I'm sorry, I misheard you.
The listeners, podcast listeners.
I think, part of the reason why we wrote this book is that we just talked about VUCA world, right? And we live in a volatile world right now where people are forgetting how to have conversations, forgetting how to agree to disagree and still being cordial and friends and moving forward and being professional. I think we need to get back to that in some way. I think leaders are getting beat up left and right. They're easy soundboard, too easy to fire at. And I think this book in itself will help you resonate, who you are as a leader and what you can control and what you cannot control, and these are coming from leaders from 2000 years ago, and it still strikes through to human emotion. That's not going to go away with all the AI and all the technology that we have. You still have to deal with human beings, and a lot of times leaders take a lot of things to heart. And I want you to know that, you need to self-reflect, you need to take care of yourself. And there's other leaders out there going through the same thing like you. And if this book can help you, guide you in some way, then that makes Danny and I very happy. And if we can help you through a phone call or a DM or a Zoom, we'd be happy to do that as well. Because we're all in this together, right? Isn't that why we got into education? To try to make the world a better place?
Yeah, that's so important to remember, right? You cannot control everything, but also reaching out to those people who you can lend an ear to and, read some of these thoughts of, like you said, leaders from 2000 years ago, just how you can infuse that into your daily leadership. Where can people connect with you and find you online?
Yeah, easy enough. I'm at Glenn, 2 N's, G Robbins, Robbins. So Glenn G Robbins, and you can type that into X or Twitter, whatever you call it, or you can go to glennrobbins.com and you can find everything right there.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being my guest on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. It was a pleasure getting to know you and hearing more about your book.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and it's a pleasure. So I hope to talk to you soon.